The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice, is calling on Congress to restore voting rights protections. Now, it's a cause that was championed by Congressman John Lewis. She made the comments at the Lewis funeral yesterday.
As we honor the life of Congressman John Lewis, who shed blood on that Edmund Pettus Bridge, that we might have the right to vote. Grant that we never again take that right for granted, and that we exercise it no matter what, and that we never again tamper with that right. Overtaking this hour, our Congress, that they might restore voting rights protections in our nation. As we honor the life of
Lewis, as you know, died earlier this month after fighting pancreatic cancer. Wesley Lowery is a correspondent for 60 in 6, and he wrote a lengthy obituary for Lewis in GQ magazine. 60 in 6 features 60-minute-style storytelling in around 6-minute episodes. It airs on the streaming app Quibi and is produced by CBS News, which is a part of Viacom CBS, an investor in Quibi. Wesley, good morning. It seems every time you come on, I'm raving about a piece you wrote, and here I go again about that GQ piece. It was so beautifully written. I thought you captured him so brilliantly because of all the people you talked to. But in part, you wrote this. You said John Lewis, quote, is a breathing civil rights monument, and that he was a bridge for civil rights, from the civil rights movement to the contemporary world, an enduring reminder of how the nation's past shapes its present. I read that and I went, go, you go, Wes Lowery, you go. So after all the people that you've talked to, because I really think you captured the man and his mission, after all the people you talked to, and you talked to many people in his life, how do you sum him up?
Certainly. You know, I think that, John Lewis in many ways was someone with a real integrity of spirit and of mission, a real true believer in nonviolent philosophy, but also in agitating to try to change the country and make it better. And I think that that sentence that you highlighted, this idea that he's kind of in many ways, or he was a living monument, but also, right, there can be a temptation with that to, some almost turn him into a Santa Claus figure, right? Well, and that's John Lewis. He did that thing so many years ago. But the fact that he was still with us was a reminder that these struggles weren't that long ago, right? That we're not that far removed from the civil rights era. That's not to suggest that there haven't been major changes and that we aren't getting better on these things, but it was this reminder that, I think sometimes with history, we like to pretend that things were longer ago than they were because we would never do such a thing, or how could we? And John Lewis was a reminder that this fight kind of was still going on, because here's this boy who was beaten on that Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right to vote, and if he's still alive, if he's still here with us, then that couldn't have been so long ago.
Yeah. Hey, Wes, did you ever get a chance to meet him by chance during your travels? Did you ever spend any time with him?
Certainly, yeah. I spent some time with John Lewis. When I actually first got to the Washington Post years ago, I was covering Congress primarily. And so I would run into Congressman Lewis just in the hallways, and have conversations and talk. And, we weren't particularly close. There are many reporters and colleagues of mine who were closer to him than I was. But I knew John Lewis and had interacted with him. And he was someone who always took the time to talk, to have conversations. There was a humility that kind of radiated off of him in a way that isn't always true of our elected officials, right? And isn't always true, frankly, even of other great people. And that was something that was so particular about him.
Listen, we all treasure those times now. They take on, to me, a very different meaning. In his final words to us in his New York Times op-ed, he says, the most powerful nonviolent change agent we have, what's at stake? He said voting, he was talking about voting, is the most powerful nonviolent change agent we have. What's at stake, do you think, in the fight against voter suppression? It's a very serious thing coming up with the election in November.
It certainly is, and we saw both what Representative Lewis wrote in his final words and then what Bernice King and then later Barack Obama said in their eulogies yesterday, right, that this fight over access to the ballot box is real. It's something that's still going on for a lot of people. It's not a settled question. And so there's a lot at stake there, right? We still have major questions to answer, right, about voting rights in places like D.C. or Puerto Rico, or should we do automatic registration or a federal holiday? And so, this is not a fight that's over. And I think that that's something that Representative Lewis talked about often, right? And I think one of the things he said, and he wrote this in the piece, was at times there can be this sense that, people feel as if they voted and it hasn't paid off for them, or they feel disenchanted. But he noted that, in a democracy, the vote is the most powerful tool. And he was urging a lot of the young activists and protesters. He supported them and supported the work they were doing in the streets, but he was urging them to show up in November as well.
Yeah, and he's certainly passed on the baton to the next generation of activists. What do you think that they can learn from him, briefly?
Certainly. Look, I think that it's a resilience.
Certainly.
John Lewis was beaten to within inches of his life, not just once, not just on the bridge, many other times. And so I know I talk to a lot of activists and they get discouraged at times, but I think that, John Lewis is a representation of, getting knocked down and getting back up. Because if the thing you're fighting for is worth it, you got to keep getting back up.
Yeah, I marvel that he was never bitter. He was always very, very brave. Thank you, Wes Lowery, for your time. Can't wait to read your next piece. Thanks a lot. You can watch 60 in 6 on the mobile streaming app, Quibi. Congressman John Lewis's legacy of good trouble inspires us all. So we at CBS are very excited to honor him with a very unique tribute and primetime special featuring some of the biggest names in entertainment. So how did this idea come about? Oprah and Tyler, as in Winfrey and Perry, went to Viacom CBS and pitched the idea. Viacom CBS said yes. Then they invited Brad Pitt to be one of the hosts. He said yes. Then they invited me to be one of the hosts. I said yes. Our focus is on the deep sense of empathy and justice that guided Lewis, which all of us strive to echo these days. It features very special performances by artists like Common and John Legend. Here's a first look.
That's why we walk through America with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up. One day, when the glory comes,